Broadcasting live worldwide.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
And now, thank you for tuning in to...
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now your host.
Oh, we're back, and with us right now is Roger Jason Stone. He is an American conservative. He's a political operative. He's a consultant. He's a lobbyist. He's worked for Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and Jem Kemp and Bob Dole and George Bush, Donald Trump. He's worked for a lot of Republican causes, and he was arrested on January 25th, 2019 in connection with Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation, charged with witness tampering, obstructing official proceeding, 5 counts of making false statements. In November 2019, a jury convicted him on all 7 felony counts. He was sentenced to 40 months in prison, July 10th, 2020, days before he was commuted his sentence, and finally on August 17, 2020, he dropped the appeal of his convictions and was pardoned on December 23rd, 2020 by President Trump. Roger Stone, thank you for joining us.
You're delighted to be here. That was a very good summation of the facts in the 2-year odyssey that I've been through, which has been a draining, terrifying, driven us, to the edge of poverty. It's an extraordinary thing when you are targeted for prosecution, particularly for political reasons, and then afterwards, not only do we find that there is bias and corruption by the jury forewoman, the judge makes a number of rulings that we thought were unconstitutional. Essentially, she blocked any effective defense. And then, ironically, in the dark of night, on midnight, because of a court order, Zeb, you're not going to believe this, but Robert Mueller's last final redacted sections of his report on Roger Stone were released by the U.S. Justice Department, in which they admitted there had no evidence whatsoever that I had any connection with the Russians, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, that I transferred any emails, that I had anything to do with the theft and publication, the alleged theft and publication, I should say the phishing and publication of John Podesta's emails. So there you have it. The president was right. I did not get anything even approaching a fair trial. I was gagged during it, so I could never, correct many of the incredible misstatements in the public square by the media. But recall, they told you that I would be charged with espionage, treason, money laundering, mail fraud, wire fraud, unauthorized access to a computer, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln.
But at the end of the day, they were making false statements, is what it seems like the gravity of their charge was.
Well, but here's the problem: you can't lie about the very matters that they admit they couldn't connect you to. This should have been disclosed to us before trial.
Let me have a question. You were sentenced to 40 months. Okay.
In any event, I thank God that Donald Trump had the political courage to do this in an election year. Improbable. There's no question that he saved my life, because under the current DOJ Bureau of Prisons regulations, all legal precedents at my age and in my physical condition, I should have been sent, even if I was still to be held and punished for something I didn't do, in home confinement. Michael Avenatti was, Michael Cohen is, Paul Manafort is, Rick Gates is, and so on. I think Harvey Weinstein is at this point. But the judge said I had to go immediately to a facility in a squalid facility in Georgia, where they insisted there were no COVID-19 cases, except for the prison guards union insisted there were at least 200 that were being hidden, which later turned out to be true. Now there's more than 500. So it was a death sentence.
So you didn't spend a day in jail, right? So you were commuted before you actually started the sentence.
That is 3 days before, actually, it was quite a drama. That morning, it was a Friday, Facebook announced that I would be in for all time, and they released a detailed report. It was very clever, but they said I owned 100 fake Facebook profiles, when in fact I've never owned one, not one. It's a total fabrication. So I'm banned for life there. Then the appeals court upholds the sentence. I have 3 days to surrender to the president of Georgia, and then 2 hours after that, the president commuted my sentence.
Did you expect the president to commute your sentence?
Well, I certainly prayed for it. I had no guarantees or anything. He never told me in advance this was a surety. Other people who had talked to him told me that they thought he would do the right thing, but I think he played his decision very close to the vest. But, I mean, he's absolutely right. I mean, when the jury forewoman in your case is attacking me by name in connection with this very case on Facebook and Twitter, but then has those posts on a private setting during jury selection and the trial, and then deletes them after the trial, and repeatedly attacks the president in the same two platforms, also our privacy setting, calls herself a member of the resistance. No, I don't think you can be a fair-minded juror in the case of Roger Stone.
Did you have any conversation with the president after he commuted and pardoned you?
I called him. We talked, I guess, we've talked a couple times, but and the lawyer David trial.
Oh,
David Schoen is one of the most brilliant lawyers I have ever come across, and I'll tell you why I say this. He not only has an excellent, but he understands the overlay of politics on whatever case he's trying. Most lawyers in the courtroom, they don't understand that how what's happening in the courtroom is perceived and plays with the public is extraordinarily important to your case. David understands this perfectly, which was an excellent choice. I thought he did a super job of making the case that the impeachment was extraordinarily hypocritical by a number of these Democrats.
Now, you're a lifelong Republican. You're conservative. Did you go to CPAC?
I was not invited to speak at CPAC, but I was there because I had promised two very prominent rappers who are fine gentlemen, Christians, very, 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 very conservative, of course. I would be in a music video. So I couldn't let them down, so I was in Orlando. I did kind of a drop-by. I guess you could say I crashed CPAC, and I was in the lobby for a little bit, and I spoke to, OAN, Fox, CNN, and so on. But I was not there for the president's speech.
Because they played some of the sites, I don't know if you've seen online, where they said that you were rapping with the rappers, you were dancing to the lyrics, but the lyrics that you were dancing to was Trump 2020, yeah, he had it in the bag, and that they were also supporting, I guess, what happened on January 6th. So they're trying to link you to...
I think that would be a reach. However, I'm going to tell you, the lyrics were incomprehensible to me, as they always are. But secondarily, only I speak for me. So that would. I looked at the lyrics. And I think that that's kind of a cheap shot. I really do.
Because they say you danced to the Patriots who knocked on the Capitol. So that's what they said.
Look, I think I have been extraordinarily clear that I was not on the ellipse. I was not in the March to the Hill. I wasn't on the Hill. I wasn't in the Capitol. I knew nothing about this in advance. If I would have turned the people in, it's a stupid, destructive idea. What person would think that it would help the Trump cause to trespass and destroy public property and to menace members of Congress? No, I've been accused of a lot of things, but stupid is not one of them.
Now, you go back with Donald Trump a long time. You encouraged him, in the 1990s to run for president, right?
1988 was the first time.
Okay.
1988 was the first time I realized that he kind of had the size and the personality and the independence and the feistiness and the fight to be a great candidate, and I still think that the extraordinary changes that he wrought, particularly the changes in the Middle Eastern policy, which I strongly support. I think that the peace deal put together by Jared Kushner was an important step forward, very, very key. I think moving the capital was the right thing to do, and I just pray that Joe Biden doesn't move it back.
Now, you go back with him such a long time. It's the embassy. I think the Democrats say they're going to keep it in Jerusalem. So that's what they're saying right now, and I hope they stick to that. I hope they stick to that. Now, you go back such a long time. You encouraged him to run, you said, in 1988. Do you think he's going to run again in 4 years? Would you encourage him to take that race again?
Well, for 4 years is a very long time. It's a very long time, particularly in American politics, because things change so quickly. There's no question that if the president was in good health and he had the vigor for the fight, he would be the commanding choice of most Republicans. He has changed the Republican Party forever. He learned a lot, I think, in his first term about how deep the swamp is, way deeper than he thought. But he did some great things. I mean, the greatest job boom in American history, the greatest boost in wage growth, the lowest levels of unemployment among all Americans, black, white, Hispanic, Asians, women, everybody. It's an extraordinary record.
So what do you think did? What do you think did him in? Why didn't he win? He came close, but no cigar. Why do you think he couldn't make it over the finish line this time around?
I think COVID-19 was a really substantial, handy, kind of damper on his campaign style. The period that his signature rallies, which is the single best way that he communicated to his voters, were hobbled. I think that the campaign spending, which I don't think the president really was controlling, did not preserve enough money for paid media. My good friend Hank Scheinkoff, who, to my mind, is probably the smartest guy, in the Democratic Party.
I was going to say, even though he's a Democrat, you're friendly with.
We've been friends for many, many years. We worked on some nonpartisan things together and some things in other countries together. But in any event, Rabbi Scheinkoff pointed out to me how little they actually spend on all media, where Joe Biden's going on the air in September and staying on the air on broadcast television, on cable, on urban radio targeted to African Americans, on his video. Trump is doing none of these things, and then when he does spend on them at the end, it's relatively thin. He is right that he won without those things 4 years ago. But 4 years ago was a completely different dynamic, and no two races are the same. Hillary Clinton was carrying negatives that even Joe Biden wasn't carrying in this race.
Did you try to discredit Hillary Clinton with Julian Assange, with the WikiLeaks founder?
As we know from the unredacted sections of the Mueller report that were released, surprisingly, this past election at midnight. That's an odd time for a press release. The Department of Justice, because they were ordered by the court in a lawsuit by BuzzFeed, disgorged the final unredacted sections of the report by Roger Stone, which they concluded they could find no evidence of collusion or collaboration between me, Assange, WikiLeaks, including the alleged phishing and publication of John Podesta's emails. It's there in their words, not mine. So how can one lie to Congress about things one is not involved in?
Our guest, you hear, is Roger Jason Stone, born Roger Joseph Stone. When did you change it from Joseph to Jason, by the way?
The disagreement between my parents.
Okay, I was wondering. But RJ, if you call yourself RJ, you're on safe ground. He's a political operative, lobbyist. He's worked for Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Kemp, and Donald Trump. When we come back, we continue our conversation.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Talkline radio and TV with Zev Brenner is just phenomenal. Everybody concerned about the Jewish community should listen and watch. He has the best guests. He asks the most interesting questions. He's always so well prepared. It's talk radio and television from a Jewish point of view at its very best.
To advertise on the Talkline network and Talkline's email and social media blasts reaching over 70,000 people, please call 212-769-1925, extension 100. That's 212-769-1925, extension 100. Or email info@talklinenetwork.com.
Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community. You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now your host,
Roger Stone, political operative, is our guest, and we'll get to as many calls as we can. 212-769-1925. Let's go to Lorna in Hicksville, Long Island. Your question for Roger Stone. Go ahead.
All right. Well, it's more of a comment than a question, but truthfully, I have seen the evidence with my own eyes of unbelievable voter fraud. I saw it on Rudy Giuliani's podcast, Giuliani being Trump's lawyer. And I was just kind of surprised at the question when you asked how he didn't win and didn't get over the finish line. I'm here to tell you he won very big, actually. And I saw the proof that it was stolen from him. In other words, if somebody robbed me and nobody...
Listen, I hear what you're saying. I'll let Roger Stone respond to you. Hold on. I'll let Roger respond to you, but the problem is none of the courts have done so. Joe Biden is the president, so... But I'll let Roger respond to you. Go ahead. Yes.
Let me say this: as someone who I am not an attorney, but I have been in the political practice for 40 years, and the number of anomalies in this election certainly needed more examination. There's a lot of evidence of things that should have been examined more closely. But then, as Zev says, the three branches of government here took whatever appropriate actions there were. The courts declined to rule. Trump made his case. He made his case to the Congress. The Congress certified the election. The election's over. It is. I agree with the lady who called. This deserves far more examination. She has made a bit more of a declarative decision. I haven't seen enough to be able to say that, but I did say that the evidence and the anomalies were odd. It's unlikely that Joe Biden ran 15 to 18% ahead of Barack Obama in the African American dominated precincts. That's just unlikely. Just to give you one example, we know of. There are reports in Wisconsin, official reports of 316 ballots being counted by machine. And the time log, we know that the machine can only process 200 ballots in that time frame. Those are called anomalies. That's
right, and there's some, but they haven't been proven according to. And we have
that doesn't prove anything, but it's an irregularity. It's an anomaly that I thought deserved a further examination.
Anyway, thank you for your question. I appreciate that.
The state legislators had the right to do that, and
I appreciate your comment. Let's go to Brian in the Bronx. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, hello, Roger.
Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, yes.
Yeah, Roger, first, thank you for everything you've done. It's under horrible assault right now. Yes, Roger. Yeah, hello, Roger. To follow up with what Lorna said, an ounce of prevention is always worth 10 tons of cure. Why could you not have simply, President Trump and Giuliani, have simply put some federal officials at sites like Fulton County and in Las Vegas and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So when, for example, they were illegally throwing out observers, you would have had either a federal marshal there or an FBI agent to prevent them from throwing out the the election observers.
I'm going to let Roger respond in the interest of time.
I'm happy to address that. I'm bewildered as to why the Republican attorneys who knew that the Democrats were in state by state and making election law changes, particularly where they had both houses and a governor, that made fraud easier. Let's put it that way, theoretically. And the Republicans sat there. In a few states, the state Republican parties would fight it, but the Republican National Committee was asleep. And if the president had ordered federal marshals to certain precincts, then he would be accused of attempting to suppress the African American vote, or the urban vote, or the Spanish vote, or whatever precinct he sent them to. So in Fulton County, all of the contested precincts, would trigger that political charge. The fundamental safeguards against this should have been built 3 years ago.
Right, they should have had an operation in place, not at the last moment. That's what they said, that if the president felt that there were going to be some problems, he should have had more people on the ground.
Yeah, I think that is the case. But really, you have to remember, again, as I said earlier, this drama plays out against a backdrop of politics. It's a legal proceeding, but it plays out based on the political politics of the time.
We have a few moments left. I'm going to try to screen one more call, Roger. But you worked in the Nixon White House. Tell us about who saved Israel during the Yom Kippur War. You were there.
Yes. By the way, the lady who called in earlier is absolutely correct. I myself looked at precinct after precinct after precinct in Philadelphia where more people voted than were registered to vote. That I saw myself.
The problem is the courts didn't rule on it, and that's why
let's go back to your question, which is, yes, as I think most people know, Richard Nixon was my political mentor. I met him when I was 16. I went to work for him when I was 19. I was recommended to him by John Davis Lodge, the governor of Connecticut, former congressman, later went on to be ambassador to Spain and Argentina. As you know, in 1973 at Yom Kippur, the Israelis, in a very rare failure of their intelligence, find that the Egyptians and the Syrians have launched an extraordinary attack, and their backs are against the sea. They are completely taken by surprise, and they are swiftly running out of both lethal aid, and I should say they need both medicine and bullets, to put it mildly. And they appeal to the United States. Nixon hears all sides, and Henry Kissinger is stoutly against doing anything to help Israel in this moment of peril. He says it will trigger the Russians, Mr. President. You can't risk it. Admiral Thomas Moorer is also opposed. He says that he can get the aid, he can airdrop what Golda Meir is asking for, but it would take, as he says, 48 hours. And Nixon tells him to go. So there is a tape that they never play. It's Nixon who calls him after 24 hours and says, "So I assume the stuff is on its way to Golda." He says, "Well, no, sir, not really. We haven't chosen the aircraft yet." It's because Kissinger told Moorer to stall as they hoped to talk Nixon out of this. Nixon went out of his mind, and he said, "I don't really care about the Russians." He says to Moorer, "If those planes," he said, "send anything that can fly," he says. "If those planes are not in the air in the next 2 hours, I'm going to come over there personally and put my foot up your ass." That can be found. So he was.
And is that on the tape? Is that on the tape?
I mean, he did. He basically he decided to airlift what Israel needed over the objections of Kissinger, over the objections of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, over the objections of the entire National Security Council. He did the right thing at the right time.
He saved Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Is that all on tape, that whole conversation that you quoted?
The Moorer conversation is one of the ones that it exists, but it is rarely transcribed. A lot of the Nixon tapes have not been transcribed. The tapes that John Dean puts forward claiming to be a full transcription are missing an extraordinary material as per the logs. So, but that can be found. Obviously, the media at the time had no interest in playing anything that was exculpatory regarding Richard Nixon.
So anyway, we're out of time. So what's your next, Roger Stone?
I'm going to write the definitive book about this 2-year ordeal in which the federal government, for political motives, tried to crush me, really tried to pressure me into testifying against the president regarding some 29 cell phone calls we had when he was a candidate in 2016, which I declined to do because it would be lying, and I refused to bear false witness. So I want to tell that tale, but I also want to move on with my life. I'll be doing a daily podcast on politics. I'm going to write yet another book that beyond the first one. Right now it's entitled "Roger Stone Did Nothing Wrong: My Political Prosecution."
Look forward to having you back, Roger Stone.
2020 election.
Look forward to having you back.
Thanks.
If they make a movie, who do you want them to play Roger Stone in the movie?
James Woods.
Okay. Thank you, Roger Stone, for being with us. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.